name is Ibby, and this show is called What's Wrong With Me? Now, first of all, that is a rhetorical question, okay? I don't need any of you coming here and telling me what is actually wrong with me, because I might start crying. None of you are my therapist, and I know that, because when I asked her to come see this show, she told me that it would be inappropriate, and that my coping mechanisms are getting weirder. Look, I know just by looking at me there is obviously something wrong with me, okay? I am well aware that I am dressed like a convict from the world's brightest prison. A CBeebies presenter that's gone off the rails a bit. Or... I promise you I just dress this way because I'm autistic. I should probably explain this. When I was younger, I was obsessed with Sylvanian families, these little creatures, and I still carry one around to this day just for like comfort. And I thought, what better way to explain what's wrong with me with the fact that for the last 15 years, my mental stability has relied on these little creatures. Like I said, this show is called What's Wrong With Me, and it's going to cover some of the things that are wrong with me. I say some of the things because we don't have enough time for everything. Also, if you find me talking about my childhood asthma funny, please get a hobby. Like I said, my name is Ibby, and that gets shortened sometimes to Ibs, spelled I-B-S. More on that later. My middle name is Harriet, which is quite a cute story. I was named after my dad's favourite fictional book as a child, Harriet the Spy. Harriet's now thought to be an autistic character, so I didn't have the best luck going into the world. I have a theory that it's my parents' fault for the reason that I can't digest food properly or look people in the eye. Anyway, starting off the show into what is wrong with me, we've got... This was meant to be on my PowerPoint for reasons I'm never going to feel joy, but can you tell I made this like a week ago and it's already outdated? Starting off into what is actually wrong with me, when I was 16 years old, I was diagnosed with generalised anxiety disorder, which basically means that I'm always anxious. I'm always shitting myself. As we'll get onto later, I'm always shitting myself. Just means that things are a bit more difficult for me. I thought I'd explain it with a little graph, okay? So this is a non-anxious person. They're normally coasting along at a 0 on the anxiety scale. I'd love to feel that one day. But maybe something stressful happens, like, oh, I have an exam, or maybe something more stressful like, oh, my cat's died, or oh, my mum's in hospital, or oh, I'm going through a divorce. That's not me, okay? I don't have a cat. Just means that things are a bit more anxious for me, anxiety gets higher, it's not fun, okay? But there are some benefits. For example, doing this, speaking to a room full of strangers about my personal, intimate medical history, it's basically the same as going through the checkout at Lidl for me. So the way I was diagnosed with anxiety is I had to go to the doctor because I was experiencing these intense periods of nausea. The reason that's funny is because I have emetophobia, which is a fear of vomiting. I talk more about my fear of vomiting, but one of my triggers is actually talking about it. I didn't script an anxiety attack into this show. So, hold on, everyone's okay, just give me a second here. We're good, okay. Everything always gets easier when I do that. No, I went to the doctor, she did the relevant test, she took my blood and she asked me questions like, oh, do you drink? I said no. She said, do you smoke? I said no. She said, there is a chance you could be pregnant. I said no. She said, wow, you lead a really boring life. I said, yes. But no, came back all clear and she was like, you've probably got anxiety. So anticlimactic, right? I thought when you're diagnosed with a mental illness, it's really sad, and they sit you down and they go, we're so sorry, there's nothing we could do. Because it's all in your head, you idiot! But no, my next diagnosis came shortly after this, and it was a really fun one. Depression. So the way I was diagnosed was that my therapist gave me this little questionnaire, medical formula for are you depressed or not. I don't know how she didn't diagnose me with autism right then and there, because I looked at this medical formula and I thought, well, I'm I'm not feeling down, depressed or hopeless several days. I'm also not feeling down, depressed or hopeless more than half the days. It's kind of more than half the several days, so maybe I'm 1.5, not 1 or 2. It's not how it works, it's a medical formula, but it's fine. So I gave this to her and I'm sat in therapy for the first time and I'm like, okay, this is fine, you know, sofa's comfy and she's tallying up my scores and that artwork on the wall looks really nice. Does liking that mean I want to kill my mum? Turns out no, but if you're going to put that in your therapy office. But no, I don't really have much more to say about depression, because it turns out it's quite sad. Some of you will have personal experience with depression. If you don't, try not to. Like if you're bored one afternoon and you're like, oh, maybe I'll just develop depression for fun. Don't do it, okay? I had to go through my A-levels with it, and A-levels are tough as it is, but you add in severe depression, severe anxiety, as we'll get onto later, undiagnosed autism, it's a bit crap. And I almost dropped out of school altogether. I was stressed every day, and by the end of it, I got really good grades, which not necessarily funny, but I'm just proud of myself for that. It's a massive achievement for me still to this day. Anyway, who wants to hear about the times I shit myself as an adult? That's right, on to our next diagnosis, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And I was debating whether or not I should do this bit because it is a bit embarrassing, it's a bit personal, and IBS, it's about poo, so you know, there are some shit jokes in it. There's also some jokes about poo, but I think if everyone's okay, I'm actually just going to skip this section to save me the embarrassment, so please just ignore this. You can use your imagination. My next diagnosis was 4 years in the making. It was a massive one for me. It took hours of phone calls, hours of appointments, and in August of 2022, I was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, or condition, I don't really care. I prefer to say that I am autistic rather than I have autism, just because it's not something that's going to go away, it's not something that's going to be cured, it is me. You know, in the same way I say I am a drama student, I don't say that I have no career prospects. There's quite a harmful stereotype that you have to look a certain way to be autistic, and that's just not true, okay? I know I'm dressed the way I am, and I'm not really making direct eye contact with any of you, and I've been fiddling with a toy from my childhood, but I swear it's a stereotype, okay? Now, I was quite late to being diagnosed, as I said. I was 21 years old, but the signs were all there as a child. And I don't blame the adults in my life for not realising, because, you know, kids are weird, okay? But there are weird kids. And then there are kids who make PowerPoint presentations for fun. I was that kid. Still am that kid. Also, when I was 14 years old, I went to see The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime for the first time. It's a show about an autistic teenager. And I saw this and I thought, wow, it's like someone's crawled inside my head and written a show from my perspective for the first time. I relate so much to this autistic teenager. Anyway, it was my therapist that first brought up the idea of me being autistic. You know, I'd been going to her for a while, we'd explained why I was there. She explained that the painting on the wall was for decoration and not that I wanted to kill my mum. And she turned to me and she said, okay, Ibby, so let me get this right. So you had no friends growing up, you still don't like socialising now, you don't like making eye contact, so you have these very niche interests you know everything about. You have the same routine every day, you're very literal and straightforward in your thinking, you can't read social cues and you don't like loud noises. Have you considered the possibility that you might be autistic? I thought, I have here the DSM, which is the book for being diagnosed with a mental illness or disorder. This is the criteria for being diagnosed with autism. You don't have to read all of it, I know there's a lot on the page, but it's basically word for word my symptoms. Again, don't blame the adults in my life for not realising, but there comes a point where you have to think, why is this kid so weird? Also, if you're looking at that and thinking, no, everyone does that, that's normal, let me refer you back to this. I'm not a doctor, okay, but being diagnosed autistic has put basically my entire life into context. So, for example, autistic people are more likely to experience anxiety and depression as a result of living in a world that's not built for us. You know, like the overhead lights in supermarkets, for example, they feel like mosquito zappers on my brain. And like the noises in supermarkets as well, like trolleys and people moving about, and the smells in supermarkets, and maybe I just don't like doing my food shopping. Aside from anxiety and depression, with IBS, autistic people poo funny. I know this doesn't seem like a very academic show, but I read a medical journal for this. Again, not a doctor, couldn't get the full gist of it, but what I did understand is that autistic people have a different gut flora to non-autistic people, so we experience gastrointestinal issues more. And what I was thinking about while reading this was, if the research is there one day, could it be possible to diagnose autism through poo? Because I know I didn't mention it, I'm quite familiar with giving a stool sample. And if given the choice between talking to strangers about my issues or giving a stool sample, I'd rather do that. I know I'm doing, talking to strangers about my issues right now, but I'd rather be in the toilet. I think my point with making this show is that if I had understood earlier, then things wouldn't have been as hard for me. I wouldn't have had to use the DSM as a bingo card, for one thing. But if I had been understood earlier, then I wouldn't have had to gone through this. And if someone opens up to you in the same way that I have, then just try to understand them. I mean, if they make a PowerPoint presentation for you, then applaud them afterwards. And that is me saying, applaud me afterwards. Just try and accept them and understand them, because it could go quite a long way. So that's what's wrong with me. Thank you for listening. Before you start applauding me, because it kind of overwhelms me, just let me.